Yes, welcome into Sports Bit. Betting Insight today, Pauly and Teddy Thursday, May 11th. Big game breakdown. Astros and Yankees in Game 6. Can the Spurs close out the Rockets? Rockets big favorites at home in that one. And also, deep dive, we continue with our NFL team previews. LA Rams, not going to be pretty. We'll get to that coming up. Bad beats, bad bets, bad for the books. Again, some horrific beats in MLB. Our friend Nick Bogdanovich, Director of Trading at William Hill. You'll see the sickest beats every day in Major League Baseball. It happened 2 days ago. It happened again last night during the day. How about day game? Giants and the Mets under 8.5. It's 3-2 Mets in the ninth. Fell 11. Shenanigans with the bullpens in this one and a key error.
Yeah, 3-2 in the ninth, and then the bullpens gave up more in that last inning than had been scored in the first 8. How about this? San Fran had lost 133 consecutive games when trailing after 8 innings. But yeah, the Elmer by Wilmer Flores played a part, but Familia, 2 hits, 2 walks, including a bases-loaded walk to Christian Arroyo. Tough beat if you had that under. It wasn't the only tough beat in MLB yesterday. No way.
Here's another one. The Orioles plus $1.60. No Breton. They got problems in the bullpen. 6-2 in the 8th. Nationals rally and win 7-6.
Yeah, and Baltimore was in control of this game. It was 3-0 in the second. It was 6-2 in the 8th, as you mentioned. But when your closer's on the DL, like Britton is right now, that leaves you with Brad Brack. Brack's a great setup man, but he's been scored on 4 times in his last 8 appearances. He gave up a multi-run lead in the bottom of the 9th against the Yankees and against the Nats during that span. And, of course, when your setup man has to close, it means more trouble for Showalter because he's got to figure out who's going to set up right now for Baltimore. So this is an Orioles bullpen that we loved coming into the season. Not right now, we don't. It took a brutal beat if you had Baltimore at that nice plus price. And underbettors were in trouble in that game anyway.
It's a vicious beat if you're a DC sports fan and you played that 3-team parlay against your favorite teams because of the track record of the pro teams there. The Wizards haven't been past the second round since 1979, and also the Capitals haven't made it past the second round since 1998. So if you played a 3-team parlay against the DC sports teams, $100 would have paid $1,100. The Nationals ruined that party with their comeback too, so that makes it even worse. Bad bets: Indians, Blue Jays under 8, bet down to 7.5. It got over the total in the 3rd inning.
Yeah, and there's nothing better than having an over in a game that cashed at the top of the 3rd. You're like, no rain. Oh, we're in Toronto. We don't got to worry about it. But yeah, anytime the under gets steamed down and they score 5 runs in the 1st, we got to call that a bad bet, Pauly.
All right, and some money came in late on the Penguins, but if you had the Capitals, shame on you. They dominated the last 3 games, but they didn't dominate Game 7. This is what they do. They're 1-9 all-time in playoff series against the Penguins. They get shut out at home in a Game 7. Again, they haven't made it past the second round since '98. Ovechkin's never made it. Penguins, best in the history of sports, 6-0 all-time on the road in Game 7s.
Yeah, and I was stunned at this number. Just given I'm not a hockey guy. I'm not going to claim to be a hockey guy. But the Caps do not win Game 7. They don't win them at home. They don't beat the Penguins, etc., etc. To see Washington minus 170. Even I got involved with a hockey wager last night, Pauly.
Wow, I saw $2 in the afternoon.
Didn't last, obviously. Not even a little.
No, and it continues for D.C. Bad for the books. There was also a bad bet. There was a little bit of Washington money. The home team is now 9-0 straight up in this matchup this season. Celtics and Wizards total, our play of the day steamed up from 215 to 218, off to a slow start. But Avery Bradley went nuts in another blowout for the Celtics.
Yeah, another blowout in a playoffs full of blowouts. The good news for the Celtics, 123 points scored and only 13 shots by Isaiah Thomas. He was more of a distributor than a scorer, and that's when the Celtics are at their best. They moved the ball very well when he was double-teamed. And look at the Celtics in terms of team offense. 33 assists on 46 made baskets. We talked about Brad Stevens with extra time to prepare. He showed it, and obviously 16 of 33 from beyond the arc. Washington blown out early, and never a rally, never a run from the Wizards. We've seen that from Washington more than once this postseason. And you talked about Avery Bradley. What he scored, 29 points on 19 field goal attempts. That, sir, is impact offense. He was an absolute difference maker in the first half of that game when the Celtics got out to that big lead.
And one more bad for the books. A day game, a 30-cent move on the Astros at home. I don't know if Musgrave should be laying this, but they won 4-2, beat the Braves.
Yeah, we don't know if Musgrave is supposed to be a minus $2 pitcher, but he certainly was yesterday, and it didn't matter. Bettors backed the hot team against the cold one, and they cashed with relative ease. And I'll tell you what, bad news for the rest of the AL West. The Astros got off to a strong start, despite the fact that Carlos Correa really underperformed. Well, guess what? He's hot right now. 12 of 28 over his last 7 games, had 2 doubles, and drove in 2 of the 4 runs to key the win over the Braves.
All right, up next, big game breakdown. We'll start with the only game in the association, the Spurs and the Rockets, and a good matchup between the Astros and the Yankees on SportsBit. Betting insight today on SBRpicks.com.
Go to SBRodds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.
Back on SportsBit, Betting Insight today. Time for a big game breakdown. As always, live odds, SBR odds, and sportsbookreview.com. Check out the rating guide and make sure you're betting with a trustworthy shop out there. Can we get a Game 7? Rockets at home, down 3-2. 5 o'clock Pacific, ESPN. Rockets 7, 213.5 the total. Who has anything left in the tank? Both teams gassed from the start of the fourth quarter on. In Game 5, Spurs outscored the Rockets 24-22 over the last 17 minutes of play. Teams combined to shoot 15 of 51 with 9 turnovers. Look at this graphic. When you see the minutes played and the star next to them indicates either season high, second highest, or third highest. Gordon, Mills, Aldridge, Beverly, Ginobili. A lot of those. Gordon, season high. Beverly, second highest. Green, season high. Ginobili, season high. And shame on Mike D'Antoni again for only playing 7 guys. Rockets ran out of gas.
Yeah, and the short turnaround between, remember, in the other literally, in the Houston-San Antonio series, there were 3 games played, and in the exact same time frame, there was 1 game played in the Celtics-Wizards series. So now, it's been 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 1 day off for the whole series. Now, the impact of the minutes start to add up, and specifically, the fact that the San Antonio Spurs are the deeper of these 2 teams, that is obviously going to matter. And worth noting, on the graphic, just flash that for one more second, Jonathan Simmons at 31 minutes and 39 seconds, also his second highest of the season. But, at least he's a young guy. He should be able to handle it okay. And the only thing that kept Kawhi Leonard from getting into the 40s and having his minute counts way up was the fact that he got hurt and will not be at 100% for this ball game. Hence, all the money coming in on Houston, driving this line up. The 7s, hey, there's 7.5s popping up as we record, Pauly. And this is a series that hasn't seen a 7.5 for either team since the playoffs began.
I don't trust this Rockets team, how they're playing. Mills and Ginobili are worried about their recovery because Murray started in Games 3 and 4. Pop didn't play him at all in Game 5, so that's a tough turnaround for these 2 guys. They're not used to that load, and Ginobili's old. There's D'Antoni. We got tired and couldn't push it. We had our opportunities with 3 minutes to go in the game to knock a couple threes down. This is Pauly talking. That's on you, Lou Williams. And make some plays, and we didn't do it. We played well enough to win. We didn't finish the job. Pop weighing in. Everyone pulled together and played some good defense without Kawhi being out there. The competitiveness was off the charts. And Danny Green, quote, "We all made the decision to be aggressive. We weren't going to lose the game being on our heels. We wanted to continue to attack and pressure, be aggressive on the defensive end without fouling, and try to be smart." They also grabbed a lot of key offensive rebounds, too. And Green hit a big 3. Leonard says he's going to play. It'd be the one organization who would do this and say, you're good. Limited minutes, we'll wait till Game 7, would be San Antonio. It's not just the ankle. They wrapped his knee up, too, in that game at one point.
Knee and ankle for Kawhi. So, again, we expect him to play. The markets expect him to play. But whether he's going to be vintage Kawhi is another question entirely. But let's not forget, Houston with the 7-man rotation. Pop with the deepest bench in the NBA, that matters. And the key may be, in fact, just more minutes for Simmons. The guy's got 61 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists, 6 steals in the series. He's playing defense. Because you look at some of these plus-minus numbers in the series, this is points per 100. Simmons has been the best of the bunch. Ginobili, who I don't think Ginobili is going to be able to match what he did on 48 hours rest. Not even close. But some surprising numbers here. Who are the 2 worst? Nets, points per 100 in the series. That'd be Mills and Aldridge for San Antonio. And obviously Simmons at the top of the list. So in some ways, advantage San Antonio, given the rest factor. That's not a negative for the Spurs to be playing on this short rest as much as it is for Houston.
What do you think of the total? With the short turnaround and guys being tired, will the Spurs walk it up? I imagine jump shooting teams, too, it's going to affect them because of the dead legs.
Well, we certainly saw that in the fourth quarter in OT of game number 5, where there was a lot of jump shots that just weren't hitting that rim, and I wouldn't be surprised if that continues here into game 6.
All right, game number 2. Sportsbook review rating guide. Check it out in live odds. Astros and the Yankees. Good matchup. Keuchel against Pineda. Yankees $1.25, 7.5 the total. Juice on the under. Keuchel was too good of a pitcher to have these bad road stats. Correction mode this season. You look at this graphic. 2015, 15-0 at home, 5-8 away with a 3.77. You see the home ERA. 4-5, 5-7. 2016 was lousy. This year, 3-0 at home with a 0.94 ERA, 2-0 with an ERA of 3. What do you think, Teddy? These numbers make sense? Do the numbers live up to the hype?
Well, I mean, the issue with Keuchel in recent years has been watch out for the home road dichotomy. You bet him all you want at Minute Maid. You don't bet him elsewhere. Going into this season, my mentality was, I want to fade Keuchel when he's on the highway. I want to back him on the road. And that cost me early on when I faded him on the highway. And all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a minute. This guy's pitching really good. And obviously, we're talking about a guy who's 5-0 with a .188 ERA. He's got a career-high ground ball rate right now, 63%. The markets love that. One thing he has been, he's been a little bit lucky. Just a 195 BABIP, batting average on balls in play. And of 110 pitchers that have worked 30 innings or more, only Urban Santana has a lower rate. But the Astros defense behind him is really good. When you have a ground ball pitcher that's keeping the ball on the ground, maybe that BABIP rate is going to continue to be low for Dallas Keuchel and is not something that is primed for an immediate correction.
All right, now we'll see if it's a tough read for the Yankees. Sanchino, Sanchez and Judge have never faced him. Castro, Ellsbury, Gardner, Gregorius, Holiday, and Headley are combined 9 of 57. That's just 158. They're number 2 behind the Nationals in OPS. Judge is 5th in MLB. But the same old story with Pineda. Great stuff, great control, gets ground balls. But when he makes mistakes, they're big mistakes, Teddy.
Yeah, they sure are. And again, how good is its stuff? Look at the xFIP, because xFIP is one stat that we like a lot. It neutralizes for league average home runs. It doesn't factor in the ballpark. And look where he is. I mean, the last 3 seasons of pitchers that have thrown at least 350 innings. There's Kershaw, Syndergaard, Carrasco, Sale. Holy shit, there's Pineda, number 5 on that list. A guy who is being mentioned in the same breath as the aces. But the reality, that's not the xFIP. The reality is that the guy's 21 and 23 with a 4.46 ERA during that span. Why? Because he's given up 55 dingers. And the home run to fly ball ratio has been getting worse, not better. In 2015, way above the MLB average. In 2016, again, way above the MLB average. And this year, nearly twice the MLB average. Now, that's not a sustainable home run / fly ball rate at 25%. 25% of his fly balls aren't going to go out of the park this season. But it tells you that the mistakes that he's making are problematic, which could be very problematic against a potent Houston Astros lineup.
Back to this game coming up with the play of the day. Up next, team previews continue in the NFL. Day number 2, we stay in the NFC West. The LA Rams coming up on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
Back on SportsBit, Betting Insight today. Pauly and Teddy. The deep dive continues with our NFL team previews. We continue with the NFC West. We started with the Arizona Cardinals. Now it's the LA Rams. How about this dumpster fire? Win total 5.5. Last year, 4-12 straight up. 4-11-1 ATS. I'm no longer president of the Case Keenum fan club. 9-7 to the under. Ugly numbers. Ugly. Outscored by 170 points in 16 games. Only the Browns and the 49ers had a worse point differential. Offense was held to 10 points or less 9 times. 9 times in 16 games, and scored more than 21 only twice. One of them was the Saints, I guess that doesn't count. Did not cover a single point spread in the 12 games they didn't win. What do you think, Teddy, about this horror show?
Well, let's start with the mainstream stats from last year, because the one thing we want to do with each of these team previews is say, This is where the markets are at on this team. This is what they're looking at. Are we above the markets or are we below the markets when looking at this particular team? And the mainstream stats from last year were pretty ugly. You know, they had a minus 11 turnover margin, ranked number 28 in the NFL. Their 18 takeaways were low. The 29 giveaways were high. The number 32nd ranked offense. and it wasn't even close, Pauly. They were 45 yards per game below San Francisco's number 31 ranked offense. I mean, truly woeful numbers. The defense was ranked number 9, but we have to take that with a grain of salt because in half of their games, by the second half, the opposing team's just looking to run out the clock in blowout wins. Yards per rush, they gained 3.3. That's number 31 in the NFL. Allowed 3.9. Again, better than average. Yards per pass, 5.5. That's dead last in the NFL. And allowed 6.4. So all the mainstream numbers show this offense was abysmal. The defense may or may not have been half decent, but opposing teams didn't have to do a whole lot to beat a squad that couldn't score more than 10 points in more than half their games.
Yep, CG Technology released the entire NFL schedule. The Rams aren't favored in one game. Their home games against San Francisco in Week 17. They're dogs in all of them. And as far as the star power, yeah, you have Goff, the number 1 overall pick. Gurley was great his rookie year, but the offensive line stinks. You do have Donald and Ogletree on defense. And now also you worry about the disadvantage in home games because they were so bad on offense, fans didn't want to come out and they left early. So you get a lot of opposing fans that would come in there as well because no one wanted to pay to go see that shit show. New coaching staff. McVay takes over as head coach. He'll call his own plays on offense like he did in D.C. Wade Phillips now takes over as defensive coordinator. Completely new schemes on both sides of the football.
Yeah, and of course, you know, you talk about and let me talk about the CG Technology lines for every NFL game through Week 16. Now, the Rams are likely to be favored against San Fran in Week 17, but they don't have lines up for that game. So we're talking about a team that lined at 5.5 wins. Gosh, they're not favored in any of their first 16 ball games. So they're going to have to pull 6 upsets of one sort or another to go over this win total. Let's talk about the new coaching staff. Sean McVay, certainly a bright offensive mind. It's his first gig. He's a young guy, and it's not going to be easy with this roster in transition, with a franchise in transition. You know, everything LA is doing is trying to get ready for when their real home is going to be ready, not necessarily for the 2017 season. But Wade Phillips is someone who's the master of the one-year turnaround as defense coordinator. So when you bring Wade Phillips into a defense that has some talent, you talked about Aaron Donald as a difference maker on defense. Ogletree's pretty good too. There's potential for this defense to cash some tickets all by themselves.
Down some picks because of the Goff trade, so you didn't get a lot of tools around him. 3 of their first 4 picks went toward building a receiving core. I like the Cup kid, wide receiver from Eastern Washington. They also took Josh Reynolds in the 4th, signed Robert Woods from Buffalo, gave him too much money to be their number 2. Say bye-bye to Kenny Britt and Brian Quick. They still have Austin, who's a talented kid, but he's never had a good quarterback with the Rams. They took another 2016 picks as well on Thomas and Cooper as well. The offensive line was horrible. They allowed the 2nd most sacks last season. They were 29th in adjusted line yards and adjusted sack rate. You can't develop a quarterback when he doesn't have time to throw and he's always on his butt, Teddy.
Yeah, and I mean, the biggest mistake you can make with a young QB is put him in a situation where he's going to get beat up and lose his confidence. And you know what? That happened to Jared Goff last year. It legitimately did. That offensive line wasn't just bad. They were woeful. They finished 29th in the NFL based on some advanced metric stats, adjusted line yards and adjusted sack rate. But it is an offensive line. They did spend some money in free agency. They bring in Andrew Whitworth and John Sullivan coming on board. Whitworth, of course, the Bengals are like, we don't need this guy anymore. He's on the downside of his career. But it's something for an offensive line that stunk. You know, they're still talking about Greg Robinson being an impact player. You know, he was the 2nd overall draft pick back in 2014. He's being moved over to the right side, and that means that Rob Havenstein, who is going to move to right guard instead of right tackle, and the left guard, Roger Saffold, has been pretty bad himself as an underachiever. It's an offensive line that still has a lot of question marks, and so is the receiving core. I mean, you talk about all these young guys. Yeah, Cooper Kupp and Josh Reynolds and the tight end, Jared Everett, and last year, Farrah Cooper, who they brought in, Michael Thomas. All of these young guys when you talk about veteran talent and the receiving core, I mean, it's Tavon Austin, who can't stay healthy and isn't very good, and that's about it. So when you have a young QB, a bad offensive line, and a very young receiving core, what do you expect, Pauly? Growing pains.
Well, I'm not sold at all on Goff. I don't think he's gonna make it in the NFL. I think Austin's talented and is explosive, but they can't get him the ball. Now you have the 3-4 defense with Wade Phillips, and they let T.J. McDonald go in free agency. Tremaine Johnson, they're missing him as well. Excuse me, they still have Tremaine Johnson.
Yeah, Johnson's their number one cornerback, but they brought in a guy.
They signed Webster to show up the secondary in free agency. What else do you think of the defense, and let us know about the schedule?
Well, look, I mean, defensive, this team has talent. They've drafted a lot of defense. They have an impact player in Donald on the defensive line, but there are questions in that secondary. Tremaine Johnson, they're paying $17 million to fight this season, to fight the fact that he's not elite and doesn't fit Phillips' schemes particularly well. Again, transitioning to a 3-4 defense. They need pass rushing linebackers. They don't really have that. Now, strength of schedule-wise, last year, slightly below average. They faced a slightly weaker than average strength of schedule. This year, very comparable. Slightly easier than average based on the current win totals for 2017. And they're still not favored in any game, Pauly. Of course, the NFC West faces the AFC South and the NFC East. There are 2 extra games for the LA Rams at Minnesota and at home to New Orleans.
All right, I'm with you. Under 5.5. What do you think?
I'm certainly not betting this team over 5.5. Let's put it that way. And the broader market may well move this line to 5 by the time people outside of Las Vegas are able to bet it.
All right, 2 in the books. Great to talk National Football League. All right, money time. Play of the day. Let's make it 6 in a row. Betting number 957. Astros plus $1.15. Big key to Keuchel's ground ball success. Correa and Altuve up the middle to make plays. As we talked about earlier, 6-game lead in the division, playing well, and Correa was off to a slow start. I know the Yankees are hot with the offense. Keuchel can limit them. They'll get to Pineda. Give us the plus price with the Astros. Let's keep rocking and rolling here on SportsBit. We close it out. Google Hangout tonight, Thursday, 8 o'clock Pacific. And we'll see if we get a Game 7 between the Rockets and the Spurs. And then we'll preview Game 6 on Friday's show with the Wizards and the Celtics on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.